you don't think that voting matters, but look at how cannabis policy has changed in all these states in recent years. It's happened primarily at the ballot box.
Welcome to the Greener Grass podcast from Bluebird Botanicals. I'm your host, Lex Pelger. Today we talk with Sam Darkangelo, the director of the Cannabis Voter Project. I'm very pleased to be releasing the episode today because September 25th, which is this coming Tuesday, is their National Voter Registration Day. Please see the link in the episode notes to the Cannabis Voter Project to find out how to vote in these important midterm elections. Today, Sam talks about how he began his activism work with Students for Sensible Drug Policy, moved into becoming a music writer, and then finally founding the Cannabis Voter Project. They've already attracted many important people, including the Grateful Dead guitarist Bob Weir, who is on the board of directors for Headcount, the mother organization of the Cannabis Voter Project. Also, in the episode notes, we'll link to a feature article in Forbes where the Grateful Dead percussionist Mickey Hart talks about the importance of the project and participating in our democracy. Now here's Sam to explain why it's more important than ever to be voting. This show is brought to you by Bluebird Botanicals to spread education about cannabis and other things on the greener side of life. Bluebird CBD oil comes from farms in southern Colorado and is grown using only water, soil, and sunlight. Go to bluebirdbotanicals.com for more info. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today with Sam Darkangelo, who is the director of the Cannabis Voter Project. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lex.
I just want to hear a little bit about, you grew up in Louisiana, and even you won the 2016 New Orleans Crawfish Festival Cook-Off champion.
I did. I was my team, me and my buddy Zach. Yes, we were the winners of the 2016 Crawfish Festival Cook-Off.
Wow. I don't know how many people have been to New Orleans out there, but that's a really big deal to win something like that. That's great. Now, were you raised in New Orleans, or did you move there a little bit later?
I was born in New Orleans and raised in the suburbs of New Orleans. Yeah, that's where I went to high school, elementary school, middle school, etc., and then went to college at LSU for a year before transferring to the new school in New York City, and then lived for a number of years in New York.
How did you get into activism and start working with Students for Sensible Drug Policy?
When I was in high school, Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans, really devastated the area and left a lot of people, traumatized. And in the aftermath of that, I saw a lot of young people kind of fall into drug addiction. And I came to see that the way that our society approached drug abuse was extremely counterproductive. And so my senior year of high school, actually, the Drug Policy Alliance did one of their national conferences in New Orleans back in 2007. Their international drug policy reform conferences. And at the time, I was a student at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts in their media arts program, which is basically a film program. And I wanted to make a documentary on drug laws and about marijuana legalization. So my school actually let me take the day off to go to the International Drug Policy Reform Convention and interview a number of people there. So I interviewed, whoever would really talk to me at the time, and some of them were people who worked or who were involved with SSDP. I saw SSDP for the first time at that convention and thought, I'm going to college next year and I want to start a chapter of one of these organizations at LSU when I get there. So that's what I did along with a couple of friends back in the fall of 2008.
Was it easier in New York City than Louisiana?
Not really. In a lot of ways, the chapter at LSU was more interesting than the chapter that I founded later at the New School. At the New School, everyone's very politically active. Everyone has their issues that they're interested in. And a lot of the times, there was kind of like, oh, yeah, cool, we like what you're doing. But people were so interested in sort of their own things that I didn't really get that many people to get on board. Whereas at LSU, there weren't a lot of people out there talking about those issues. So, I think we really got a lot of people interested in drug policy at LSU just because what you would describe as progressive politics isn't or wasn't really that popular over there then. So we kind of stood out a little bit more.
Louisiana is one of the arrest capitals of the entire planet, and that plays a large part from the war on drugs. Correct?
That is definitely correct. I believe we're actually the incarceration capital of the United States, which is the incarceration capital of the world. So yes, you could say that Louisiana is the incarceration capital of the planet. Yeah.
And so, what kind of work were you doing at SSDP at these two different chapters? Because here at Bluebird, we're a big fan of SSDP. It feels like they are just creating a whole bunch of shock troops to go out there and do all kinds of different activism in all these different directions. So, what was it that you liked focusing on while you were in school?
Well, at the new school, SSDP, our chapter was a bit more, I guess you would describe as educational. We'd have meetings, people would come, and we'd sort of introduce people to just the idea that the war on drugs was failing and that there were things that they could be doing to change it. We'd team up with other organizations that were doing protests and events in New York City and go get involved with those. At LSU, we got, I was only there for a year, but in that year, we got the student council or the student senate. I honestly forget the name of the body to endorse a Good Samaritan policy, or what we called it at the time, a medical amnesty policy. To make it so that when campus police or campus authorities were called in to deal with a situation where someone was having health issues related to drugs or alcohol, the people who called for help wouldn't, get in any trouble, when they called for help. So this is a thing, aiming to incentivize people to call for help, let them know, oftentimes when you've got an alcohol poisoning situation or something of that nature, people are afraid to get the authorities involved because they're worried about themselves getting in trouble. So you take that problem out of the equation, and people are more likely to call for help. So we got the student government to endorse that, but it was never actually implemented. Though it was a bit of a process just getting the student government to put out a resolution in support of it.
That's a great. It seems like it's a really important piece of the puzzle too, especially on campus where the punitive approach can do so much damage to people's future. And so, what kind of arguments would you be using for these kind of medical amnesty policies?
Essentially the one I just outlined, that, we're not trying to condone necessarily drug or alcohol use, not necessarily trying to condemn either, but, we want people to be as safe as possible. And if these laws are put in place ostensibly to protect young people, then they should really be aimed at protecting young people. And if you want people to be safe, you need to have people not be afraid to get, to call for help when help is needed. So that's it's a great way to sort of highlight the counterproductivity of the war on drugs too, because so many of these laws are done in the name of young people. They're put on the books in the name of young people. And if they're actually making things more dangerous for young people, then, they're not serving their purpose. And so the medical amnesty policy was a way to help save lives, but then also to just kind of make this first introduction to people that like the war on drugs is counterproductive.
Were you already a cannabis activist before going to college?
Yeah, well, that came a little bit later. My senior year of college, I interned with Headcount, who I now work for, and I was actually introduced to Headcount for the first time by an SSDP colleague. But Headcount, is an organization that registers people to vote primarily at concerts and music festivals. And so while interning with them, they happened to share an office with another entity, Relics Magazine. And when I graduated from college, Relics had an opening for an entry level writer position. And because Relics and Headcount were so close, I came highly recommended to Relics, and ended up doing that for the next 3 years as a journalist for Relics Magazine. And then after that, moved back down to my hometown, New Orleans, to work for Offbeat Magazine, which is a music institution down in New Orleans. And so, yeah, I did that for 5 years. Music journalism. That was my career.
Wow. I mean, what's it like to be in the, one of the best musical places on the planet and your gig is writing about music?
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a great time for sure. I definitely loved it. And part of me wonders, if I should still be doing that. But at the same time, as fun as music journalism was, really my passion was political stuff and organizing, and I you know I eventually decided I wanted to pivot in towards that direction professionally.
And so, was cannabis still a part of your story as you were going through the music world and your activism?
I kind of, I wasn't really too involved in the activist game for those years when I was a music journalist. I would get involved with things here and there, but for the most part, I had kind of let it fall by the wayside, though it was something I was absolutely passionate about.
What made you switch from music to cannabis activism?
Sure. Well, yeah, I left Offbeat to go work for the Marijuana Policy Project, and I was only there briefly before we parted ways, and I ended up teaming up with Andy, my old, my old headcount boss, brought me back in the fold there to work on the Cannabis Voter Project, which was this new campaign that we have recently launched to register people to vote around marijuana policy issues.
How does Headcount get out the vote?
Right now, the operation is primarily online. We only launched our website about 2.5 months ago, but we've been getting a ton of traffic to the website. People learning about where their congressmen, their governors stand on marijuana policy, and then registering to vote while they're there. So it's been primarily online, but we do intend to move into the event space, which is what Headcount is mostly known for. But instead of focusing on concerts and music festivals, we'd like to focus on cannabis events, cannabis oriented events, and other places where people who are interested in this issue will be gathering.
And can you give a little history of the Headcount organization that's the mother to the Cannabis Voter Project?
Yeah, absolutely. Headcount was founded in 2004 by Andy Bernstein, who's the current executive director, and then also Mark Brownstein, who's the bassist for a band called the Disco Biscuits. And the two of them got together in 2004 to found Headcount with the idea, that there was this untapped arena to register people to vote, and that was the music scene. So, Headcount is mostly known for going to concerts, music festivals, setting up booths in these places, and then, registering people to vote while they hang out at the concert. They also have a pretty great online component, harnessing the power of social media and a lot of these artists who have large social media followings to direct people to register to vote. So they've registered almost 500,000 people since 2004.
Wow. And how if anyone out there listening wanted to get involved with Headcount or the Cannabis Voter Project, how could they volunteer their time or money or ingenuity?
Well, Headcount you can find at headcount.org. The Cannabis Voter Project is over at cannabisvoter.info. Both could use volunteers. Headcount's a volunteer-based organization, so the people who are on the ground at the concerts and the music festivals tend to be volunteers who are there, contributing their time to register people to vote.
And so, what's been like for you to launch this Cannabis Voter Project? I mean, to get approached for it and then dream out the entire thing. It's quite a project.
Yeah, well, it's been very interesting. At first we had to figure out, what was the best use of our limited resources, and we landed on, making a website that kind of could act as a sort of database of where, everyone in Congress, where all the governors stood on marijuana issues, and could make it as easy as possible for people to really get a breakdown in the simplest terms of where people stand. And then also, make it easy to register to vote. The idea, people will come for that information to learn where it is that their elected officials stand and, what's going on in their state with regards to marijuana policy, what other organizations are out there on the ground, be they local or national, trying to change laws in their area. So people come looking for that information. And then while they're there, they say, hey, I can make a difference by just voting. So I'll register to vote. We make it, there's multiple places on the site to register to vote in just a few minutes. So
when you're out there educating people, do the state of the cannabis laws often surprise them?
Yeah, I think sometimes, people are surprised in different directions. People are surprised to learn that their representative isn't doing as much as they thought they might be. People are surprised to learn that their representative actually takes a more progressive stance than they thought that they did. That's kind of the idea is, in recent years, cannabis policy has sort of stopped being the third rail that it once was for many politicians. So a lot of people still have this mindset of like, well, nothing's being done politically with regards to marijuana. But that's actually changed a lot in recent years. So people, are often surprised to find that their congressman co-sponsors, legislation to allow banks to work with legal marijuana businesses or state level legal marijuana businesses. So, I think people are surprised to learn how much is going on at the legislative level. Things like the bill I just mentioned, bills to open up research, bills to legalize CBD but not medical cannabis, bills to legalize hemp. A lot's happening now, a lot more than was happening just 5 years ago. So I think that's something that often surprises people.
One of the things you hear all the time is that legislators really are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that Headcount and Cannabis Voter Project really wants to get across to people. There's this unfortunately pervasive idea, particularly among young people, that voting and political participation, these things don't matter, They get it in their heads that, their vote doesn't count or that their representative doesn't listen to them. And the fact of the matter is that those things aren't true. Your representative they're taking a tally of where their people are calling on these issues. They're watching, the one thing they watch more than anything is the votes, So we hope that there's a lot of people who are interested in marijuana policy and cannabis policy who may not be participating in the political system, but will be convinced to change that fact when they come to cannabisvoter.info and they learn about the ways that their vote can impact cannabis policy. It's kind of like an entry point for people, It's saying, you don't think that, voting matters, but look at how cannabis policy has changed in all these states in recent years. It's happened primarily at the ballot box. It's people getting together and demanding the political class look at this issue. So if we don't do that, it's never going to happen. So this is where you start.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about the project before we let you get back to work?
In the short term, but on September 25th, we have National Voter Registration Day coming up. It's a campaign that Headcount, other organizations do every 2 years, really making a big push on social media amongst like artists and musicians to get people to register to vote before the upcoming election. So we're going to do a cannabis-centric push there in 2 weeks for National Voter Registration Day. And then we're going to be, after the voter registration deadlines mostly come at the beginning of October, we're going to be just trying to make sure people get out to the polls, trying to say, you've registered to vote, but now you got to actually, go wait in line and do the thing.
How does Headcount let people know and get them out?
Well, a lot of it happens, on social media, just reminding people this is the voter registration deadline. This is, how you find your polling place. This is, the day you actually have to go and do this. So yeah, it's just, kind of just keeping it in people's faces that this is a thing that, you've got to dedicate your time to.
If we could secure a big grant for your organization, what first things would you want to do with it?
Gosh, well, I'd like to be at more events. I would love to expand the website to focus not just on national level politicians, but on state level politicians in targeted states. We could say, where members of the legislature stand in certain states where, cannabis policy has become a major issue. Could also, I'm sorry. We would also, want to also create, right now we've got where the elected officials stand, but it'd be great to have where other candidates stand as well. Do a kind of, one-to-one for every congressional district. Here's where the incumbent stands. Here's where the challenger stands, so that people can get a good idea of, what's going on in their district beyond just where their congressman stands. Because it doesn't necessarily help to know sometimes just where your elected official stands. If your elected official doesn't stand with you, it would also be good to know if there was a candidate who was more inclined to vote the way you'd like them to. So you can make a more, informed decision when you actually head to the polls.
Thanks for being on the show, Sam.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Lex.
Greener Grass is a Bluebird Botanicals podcast. Their CBD oil supports a healthy body and a strong endocannabinoid system. They've got friendly customer service who can answer any of your questions, and the number is right there at the top of their webpage. But, per the FDA, they won't be able to make any medical claims for these nutritional supplements. That's also the reason you'll hear little about CBD on this show. There's no need for us to add more evidence about CBD when a simple Google search will give you more than you can read in a month of Sundays. So this show covers the cannabis world and more with editorial freedom from Bluebird Botanicals. Thanks for joining the Greener Grass podcast. As always, our audio alchemist is Matt Payne. The Gypsy Jazz theme music comes from Brett Van Donsel. Our beautiful bird sounds are courtesy of Lang Elliott. And I'm your host, Lex Pelger, wishing you a bright green day.